now this background has largely been set by the two speakers. We hardly need a justification anymore because it has also been referred to, but then for the record, I will share it with you. Then envisioning industrialization, that's the gist of why we are here. And it is expressed through the conceptual framework, and then we shall see how we move forward. So the vision, as the previous speakers have said, is within the setting of Uganda Vision 2040, and NPA has already set us into the framework of NDP3 with the theme of sustainable industrialization for inclusive growth, employment, and wealth creation. And then also all this is within the overall comprehensive national development planning framework, which according to the vision will be achieved in 6 NDPs. And so the master plan is supposed to operationalize and guide that march towards towards achievement of the vision. And so we've cited these two authorities as a justification for emphasis on industrialization. UNIDO boss of that time, and UNECA, our own UNECA, United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, they have underscored the role of industrialization in attaining socioeconomic transformation. So, briefly, for the record, the justification that has been given falls into 5 different categories. That we have this rising trade deficit, and the president has always echoed this point, that we cannot cover this deficit without value addition, which is the basis of industrialization. And the low level of industrialization that exists in the country, is a big concern. So again, without a master plan, we cannot, think of overcoming this bottleneck. Then the heightened momentum for industrialization. How do we take advantage of that, given the global and regional contexts? And then inclusive and sustainable industrial development, leave no one behind. If we are to undertake an inclusive and sustainable industrial development, we cannot undertake it without an agreed and systematic, structure of, how to proceed. Hence, the need for a systematic master plan. And lastly, harnessing the demographic dividend. That is this demographic dividend means harnessing our own human resource. How do we turn our human resource into a development force? Again, for us to do that, we need a systematic approach on how to handle our human resource and turn it into a development force. So, in envisioning industrialization, the course of developing the industrial master plan, we wish to answer these questions. What do we want to see as the outcome of industrialization? If industrialization will be the vehicle for us to attain or one of the main vehicles to attain Vision 2040, what do we want to see as the outcome? How does the government want to achieve this industrialization? What strategy or strategies? What kind of industrialization do we want to see? Because, again, for us to use industrialization as a vehicle, we must have a shared vision. And we believe that present company, as the executive member of NPS said, you are the cream. You are in a vantage position. So we want you to share your experience and your expertise with us to be able to concretize this move. What must we do to achieve this desired outcome? How do we ensure the necessary reforms in policy, legal, structural, and institutional frameworks? We've heard from the representative from Ministry of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives that the policy is already out. So we want to see these and more instruments, how we can leverage on them to attain these stated outcomes. How do we ensure inclusivity in terms of environment, gender, and the different target population groups? As we, from the introductions, we heard that there's a representative of the Ministry of Gender, and this is this is a ministry that we depend on to always bring us back to the straight and narrow when it comes to being inclusive, being sensitive to the various target groups. And of course, we have our colleagues who will keep us informed about how we are doing on greening, the environment and so on. And finally, what is the appropriate mix of government and private sector synergies to achieve the industrialization that we want? Those of you who are old enough will remember that in the past, around the 90s, the preaching to us was government has no business doing business. But as time went on, we found that the private sector, although is a very good and dependable partner, is not enough to undertake all the investments that we need. So some of those large-scale, large account investments, we need input from government. Now, how do we get this mix right? So this is the part of, again, the guidance we need from your expertise. And so, having said that, this is how the conceptual framework now looks like, the revised conceptual framework. Now, if I may start by jumping to the end, the right-hand side, which these are the outcomes. I ask, what outcomes do we want at the end of our industrialization master plan? And so, let's say in 2040, the 20-year period that NPA has pointed out to us, we want to see increased industrial output, that is manufacturing value addition. We want to see increased industrial exports. We want to see we want to see decent employment, and we want to see environmentally sustainable industrialization. Now, those are our end results, how do we organize to achieve those outcomes? And as as we heard from NPA, our guiding, overarching strategic framework is the vision. And the vision is premised, Uganda Vision 2040 is premised on harnessing strengthening the fundamentals within the economy to harness the abundantly available opportunities in the country. And some of these opportunities that we have identified here are agriculture, because agriculture will, we know that it has, which is employing, right now it is employing more than 2/3 of our population. The human resource that we have, and as we keep on saying, our most important resource is our human resource. Right now, our human resource is structured such that 50% are below 15 years. 50% are children. Now that, on face value, that is an unfavorable structure. And this is what I said about harnessing the demographic dividend. But we know that with the proper investments, this human resource can be turned into a development force. So how do we tap into it? Then another opportunity is the SMEs. Before I go to the SMCs, there's the natural resources, raw materials. Our country is resource rich. So, and these resources, how can we leverage them to be a basis for industrialization? Another opportunity is market. The market, starting with the regional market, the East African market, COMESA, and now we have the African free trade area. So those are the opportunities that we want to, that we have, that we can exploit. And going forward, again, if you look at the vision document, it proposes a phased approach to industrialization. And we are saying that in this framework, phase one, we should start with harvesting the low-hanging fruits. And the low-hanging fruits here are agro-industrialization and light manufacturing. Since, as I said, this country is resource-rich, we can start with the raw materials that are available here, say from the agricultural production and minerals, and then we start with the value addition going forward to as a springboard to industrialization. Then phase two, going into heavy industries, and eventually phase three, the high tech. Now, as we think of those phases, we have what we've called strategic drivers. On the one hand, we have in this country considerable deposits of iron and steel, and we know that iron and steel is the basis for heavy industrialization. So we are saying that you see the flank, the left-hand flank, that although we are talking phasing, there is that strategic driver of iron and steel which can be leveraged as appropriate. And of course, we are also saying that these phases probably should not be seen as chronological. And we have an expert presenter here to take us through that, that reasoning to guide us on what would be the best way of looking at this. And of course, another strategic driver here, given our agricultural base, is fertilizers. We have a fertilizer industry developing in Tororo. How will fertilizers feature into our industrialization, particularly, as I said, the first phase? And then, of course, we have oil and gas. Now, again, this oil and gas we are calling it a strategic driver because oil and gas, of course, is a double-edged sword. It can be a very big stimulant, but of course, you all know about the Dutch disease or the oil curse. And so how can we leverage the oil and gas to support rather than risk our industrialization drive? And oil and gas, we know that in terms of employment generation, it's not a very big stuff. It doesn't generate that much employment. But its main leveraging point is it produces the cash that we can invest in other sectors of the economy. Then on the right-hand flank, we have considerations for this industrialization path. Here we have things like green industrialization, we have research and development. So as we are industrializing, we are saying these are considerations that we need to also invest in to ensure that we are on the right path. And still on the right-hand flank are the fundamentals that I talked about. And here we are talking about human capital development. This is the human resource. The investments that we must make in our human resource, because it is the human resource that will drive this pathway to industrialization. We're talking about infrastructure, investments in infrastructure, the energy, the transportation, the water, and so on, ICT, to drive this industrialization master plan. The science, technology, engineering, and so on that we need to invest in. The governance, deepening governance, investments in governance, so that we have, the level of governance that is commensurate with the level of industrialization where the economy will have, reached in terms of complexity and sophistication. And of course, with all of that, we also need investment in financial sector development. We need stronger institutions, stronger financial institutions, and so on. And
we can't industrialize like this.
I said it, energy. And then, as I said, we need to get the mix right of private sector, government investment. Well, I think the official, correct me on this NPA if I'm wrong, I think the official drive is still private sector-led economy. But as I said, we know that the private sector needs, and of course our private sector is, with due respect to the gentleman from Private Sector Foundation, but the private sector is still a bit weak. That's why we have a Private Sector Foundation to boost it. And so, what is the right mix for private sector led, but it's a greater emphasis on government strategic investments. And finally, it's not coming up, but when it comes up, you'll see.
Yeah, it's coming up.
Oh, it's coming up. That we also emphasize that there are some critical success factors that we need to keep an eye on, So, and these critical success factors are the outermost right flank. And these are things like macroeconomic stability. You know that without that, our investments will be in danger, and attracting more investors will be jeopardized. Then, I think 5 years from now we shall not be having these issues. So
2 years.
Oh, good. That is more optimistic. I'm more encouraged. So there is also another critical success factor is political leadership and political leadership and commitment. So we want our great involvement of the political leadership. Financing, we want secure and affordable financing, the building of strong institutions, and implementation planning. you know,